Hello, friends, and welcome back to Heartscapes, where we are exploring the system of Reiki at the intersection of self reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the studio. This is the third now of the series that we have been moving through called Reiki Crossroads and Connections. And I started this series because I absolutely love talking with my colleagues and friends and people that I meet out in the world whose work has certain intersections with mine, different modalities, different paths, different ways of exploring the world, but something juicy, something connected at the center of our purpose, of our values, of our goals, of our path that warrants a conversation. And we want to invite you along for that conversation. I'm really excited for this conversation because we get to go into a territory that I don't usually get to wander into, but that is dear to me, which is the territory of visual arts. I spent much of my youth, my childhood, and my early adulthood really focused on art creation, on artwork. I thought that I would become a professional artist. And while that didn't happen, creative processes in many forms have always been a part of my life and my work. And so it gets to kind of seep into the cracks of the work that I do with Reiki. But today we get to talk about it in a very explicit way because of our guest for this conversation. So I want to welcome in Ishka Lha. Ishka lives currently up in Oregon, doing some really exciting projects up there and continuing her work with visual arts. She has a background in architecture with an emphasis on natural building and eco-villages and is working on some of that up there in Oregon. But for the last good long period of time, 10, 15 years, I believe, you have been really concentrating on developing an incredible body of work as an artist, working with what you call the art of spiritual love, which is very tied to your name, Ishka Lha. And I absolutely love your work. I've loved it for the years that I have known you and been following you. And I'm really excited to explore the connections between how you relate to your work, the purpose that you have for it, and the work that I'm doing over here at Heartscapes. So welcome. Thanks so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about just what has the most heart and meaning for you in this moment that you'd like to share about the work that you are doing in the world. Um, and and then we'll bridge into some of these connections. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I typically will share that I help people to connect with their mystic heart by
Mm.
creating portals into into the multidimensional nature of our spiritual reality.
Yeah.
And for many years, for over 15 years, I've been exploring consciousness and diving into the cauldron of or taking my queries into consciousness, about consciousness. What is, how can I explore that? How can we explore? I've explored many different spiritual traditions throughout my life. I grew up Christian. That was what I had access to when I was growing up, and I ended up just going with the neighbors to church often, and grew up with that tradition. And then I segued into Tibetan Buddhism for 4 years or so, and really I've just been interested in a lot in studying all different kinds of traditions, and really wanting to find the parallels and the intersections, like this conversation, finding the intersections between all the traditions, and what it is that they're all looking for, what it is that we're all being able to explore and touch, to come into a greater sense of unity and love and feelings of magic. Whenever I think of magic, that's a big part of my work, because so often when I'm creating a work of art, I get to explore these different facets of consciousness, these different symbols, different deities, different archetypes, different rites of passage through the imagery that I'm creating. But it's also, it's a very mysterious process. There might be something that I want to explore, but I have no idea even what's going to happen, or I am learning about a certain kind of energy through the painting process. And I'm also getting to study it alongside my experience of painting these things, and getting a lot of intuitive downloads, channel downloads. There's a lot of different words out there for this kind of thing, but receiving visions for certain works and then being able to corroborate with different sources to see where they connect and how it lands with what I'm studying, and often finding that things match up.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's like a form of magic, and also being able to surrender to the magic of the universe, knowing that we don't have control, that everything is happening with this, I think, this sense of grand design. There's so many ways that everything works in the world and it has a design to it. And to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm hoping for. This is what I would love to manifest. This is what I would love to be able to feel and create in my life, and going for it, knowing that there is an element of magic about the process that we have absolutely no control over. And yet that's also really freeing, because we can surrender to that universal process of flow and creation. And if we don't know what to do, we can give it to the universe to handle for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I love the way that you describe that, and talking about, not only the work as magical and the product as magical, but as that your relationship with the process as a form of magic and as a form of ritual. And, that your work often, finds its home in places where ritual is at play. And, that you have helped to help people understand how to use your artwork in a ritual fashion, in a meditative fashion. um, and I love this idea of exploring that without attachment to how it shows up, right? Like what you just said, turning it over, letting the magic, take you, show you, reveal, guide you, and you being in a practice of letting go and not being attached to the outcome. And that really feels like, our first point of intersection, and connection, because, with the system of Reiki having its origins in esoteric Buddhism, the practice of non-attachment is really central. And the practice of shifting our focus away from, being obsessed with the past, being angry about the past, being afraid for what might come in the future, being attached to what we have in the moment, being attached to controlling what all is happening in the moment, and allowing a space of presence and stillness inside of all of that. And I get that sort of feeling, when I work with your art, and the piece that's there next to you, actually, in particular, is one that I love. I love that's the one that you brought to share here, because I get that sensation of centeredness, of stillness, inside of the movement of life, and that sensation of just simply being centered and present, unattached to
mhm.
all that is happening around us. Um, And so, yeah, being able to have a relationship with with a process that way, that then brings us into relationship with the outcome, the piece of art, in a new way, feels very aligned to how I practice Reiki in an odd way.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's another facet of that is how, um, whether we're doing energy work or creating a work of art, I mean, to me, that's kind of the same thing. Or we're out in nature and, or whatever it is that we're doing, that if we can bring this kind of centeredness to our experience, or at least receive a feeling of centeredness from being present with the nature that surrounds us and the things that we're doing, that it also brings us into, there's there's a sense of like of awe and wonder that I get when I'm creating a piece of art. And oftentimes at the end of a painting, a really good painting session, like sometimes I feel like I'm just wrestling with paint for a day. It is what it is, and you just keep showing up to your practice. But on the days that it's just been really flowing, I will sit and I'll meditate with the piece for sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And I'm just in this, it's like a heart field. I just feel so much love. It's like, it's that feeling of love. There's actually an exchange of energy between me and the piece, and that like sensation of connection. And that part about the awe and wonder, because a lot of times I don't even understand how I could have painted that, because it's just so, I think there's certain things that we do in our lives that we feel that when we've put so much love and work and dedication and care into something, and it becomes something probably beyond we could have even imagined, it creates that sense of awe and wonder, which in turn automatically quiets the mind. It's like when you see an incredible sunrise, it just makes all of your kind of monkey chatter disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, that sensation of awe, I mean, and something being awesome in its original intention, is such a central experience that's described in so many traditions. And the way in which that moment of awe really does root us in this present moment. Like, how can we be thinking about the past or dwelling on the future, when we are awestruck, right?
Mhm.
We're just right there with whatever we're perceiving in that moment.
It's a sense
And
of gratitude too. It's acknowledgement. It's acknowledgement of what's happening. What's actually happening is incredible.
yeah,
The fact that we're breathing, that exchange is happening in our lungs, and air, oxygen, and just coming in and out. And
yeah, yeah,
our organs are working without us even having to think about how it happens.
yeah, 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 right. This concept actually has been it keeps circling back for me recently. But it's the finding the magical and the mundane, like, in the same place, and that idea that the world is like nothing but miracles, that there's just miraculous magical things happening at all times. If you look out your window and watch the season turning to winter, as we approach the solstice in a week from today, um, you're looking at 1,000 miracles, and it's so prevalent that the miraculous and the magical is so prevalent that it's become the mundane, in our day to day. um is sad, and it's funny, and it's kind of amazing and awesome all at the same time. But having those moments, that we can live in a miraculous world
Mm,
and just take it for granted because it's so abundant,
mm,
right? There's
mm,
something kind of wonderful about that. But as long as we are able to have these moments, when that magic, when that moment of awe, when that landscape of the heart is revealed to us for a moment, or for 2 hours looking at a painting, or for, a half an hour chanting the Heart Sutra, as I got to do with a group of folks earlier today. that we can still drop into that sense of the miraculous, the magical, and that awareness that it's all pervasive, right? It's ever present. And then going back to whatever we have to do that day.
Yeah, and how we can bring that sense of presence to whatever else it is that we have to do that day.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of just in my own life and in the lives of other people I'm interacting with, is how can we find that connection, and how can we feel that in everything that we're doing. And whether we're in our work, and if we're in a job that we don't really like, then what are the things in that job that you can appreciate? Because I bet you, if you sit and think about it and take some time to find those little gems, you'll find them. And what you appreciates. And all of a sudden, just from finding those little pieces that you can appreciate in possibly a really shitty situation, there's a shift that happens, and we're able to find a little more peace next time we come there, or next time we interact with that person, or next time we have to do that work. We come with a little bit of a different kind of attention and intention that can really change the course of our lives, and can shift a whole story, a whole work environment, a whole community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. One of the places that we found, one of the first things that stood out to each of us as we kind of considered this conversation, we each were gravitated towards the name of each other's business. Mine being Heartscapes, your being the art of Ishka Lha, and the translation of that, of your name as spiritual love. And I am reminded of what you said in the beginning of your seeking and your curiosity about those things that show up over and over again in different traditions, different times and places, those things that seem to have a certain sense of universality as it shows up in human culture and human spiritual practice and art and just cultural endeavors. And it strikes me that one of the probably most common and most grounding of those repeated themes is the theme of love, of compassion, of kindness, of positive self-regard. That in so many traditions, love or compassion or kindness like truly is the central pillar. And then everything else is, and how do we get there? How do we actually live that on a day-to-day basis, right? How do we live as an embodiment of love, of compassion in the world, even in those shitty situations, or in relationship with people that are difficult, or in situations where people are harming us? How do we embody love and compassion while still pushing back against injustice, or pushing, naming things that are difficult, setting boundaries, like all of that still important. How to do that from an embodied place of love. And that, both of us kind of settled on that as that central pillar of the work that we're doing. And, also kind of around this idea of the landscape of the heart. And that in your work, you get to explore the landscape of the heart, in this incredibly juicy, beautiful, visceral way through art. And in my work, I'm exploring the landscape of the heart through meditation, through practice, through conversation, through teaching. And both of us are getting into the same territory. And so I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about how you relate to the territory of the heart, and perhaps anything that you'd like to share about the name of your business.
Yeah, so the Ishka Lha is the name I go by. It's the name that I took on after my spiritual awakening at 21, and that's a whole journey I'll save for another time. But I also really wanted to stay connected to my namesake and the name that I was given at birth, because I feel like that's also a big part of my destiny, and I didn't want to lose sight of that. And so I actually just ended up looking up that etymology of Jessica, which is my first name, and I found the name Ishka, and Ishka is actually two very basic root syllables that are found in many different languages. And it means many different things. It means water in Irish Gaelic. It means anything cute and small in Russian. It means love in Arabic. And the Lord or God sees, to see. And another tradition that I've connected with over the years, especially through the poetry of the Sufi mystics Hafez and Rumi, and doing universal dances for peace, is Sufism. And there's a wonderful mantra that you might know. It's Ishka Lha Mabud Leila, which means God is love, lover, and beloved. And so Ishka is spiritual love, and Ishka Lha is spiritual love. So yeah, so when I was coming up with my business name, it just seemed very natural to call it the art of Ishka Lha. Obviously, because that's my name, but also on a much deeper level, the art of spiritual love is really what I'm about. And I've been doing a lot of spiritual practices with the art as I'm creating them. They're all a little bit different, and they all kind of develop in a kind of organic way as I'm developing the piece of art. And sometimes they change over time. And it's also something that I've been working with in group settings, which I call the art experience. And it's an acronym for arts, ritual, and transformation. And so we'll go on a deep journey into the realm of one of my paintings through mantra, through mudra, through ritual, through meditation, and really getting to explore just one theme, one facet of the divine, of compassion, of courageousness, of forgiveness, all these different, of the divine mother, all these different facets of our consciousness that can bring about more and a deeper sense of unity. And also using music. I've been writing invocations for each of my paintings for many years, and translating them into song, and performing those with my partner as Jamishka. That's our music project. And doing a lot of writing about how this art, like just what this art means to me, and what I feel like it means for how it could be helpful to others. And I think that the best way I've found to help others is really to help myself find these jewels that connect me to more love and compassion, and then just share what I found, and whoever is drawn to that will receive it. Yeah, so that's what I think.
Are those art experiences held in person or online?
We've been doing them online. Yeah. So, and the best way to learn about them is through my newsletter. And then I've also been, over the years, I've been teaching workshops at retreats and festivals and different private gatherings to either paint your prayers, or what I call drawing from within. It's a drawing practice. And the one we've been doing in person over this last year has been really, really wonderful. It's the first time I've been venturing more out into just producing the classes and workshops without being invited in to do something, just having them available. And I can show you a few.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll go through a deep, we'll go through a practice. The workshop is called Drawing in Your Heart's Desire.
Mm.
And we'll go through a series of meditations and a visioning meditation. And we'll be able to tap into deeper levels into the heart. So just dropping in deeper and deeper and deeper until we get to this place where a vision can emerge from the heart, from our actual true heart's desire. Because I feel like a lot of times if we just sit and say, okay, what do we want? What do we want to manifest? We can just start jotting down all kinds of stuff. But if we don't sit down and take a moment to really settle into a heart space and know how to do that, then we might just end up thinking about and creating things that maybe aren't really for our highest good. So this is one. So then we also end up with a mudra, or excuse me, a mantra. This one is I am interconnected. And so this was the result of the vision meditation that I did for this piece. Another one is I am prosperity. So some of them end up turning out a lot like a mandala.
Yeah.
And there's ways that, they might turn out. This is called I am growing. And you can see a lot of really beautiful details in there. There's some heart spirals and leaves and just setting a deep intention for what people are wanting to work with in their lives and to create create something new that is really connected to their heart. Yeah. And it's also a mystical experience because we're not coming from a place of imagination. We're not just imagining these things. It's actually more of a message we get to receive.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point of intersection of the mystic traditions, the esoteric Buddhism that is part of the roots of Reiki is, very much in the mystical tradition, from the perspective of Buddhism, that perspective that we're going to be able to take in the teachings and embody the teachings thoroughly if we receive them through direct experience, more so than study or a learning experience, that we're gonna really be able to embody them if we take them in through experience. And
which is why also those ones, we don't use any references outside of ourselves to look at, like, how do I draw this thing? We know what it is, and we can create a representation of that for us from what we know from our own experience. It doesn't have to look exactly like a photo of something.
Yeah. One of the sources, one of the richest sources of imagery from my perspective within the system of Reiki feels so related to your work. And it's one that I don't talk about a lot on this channel. And so I'd love to just kind of take this opportunity to name it, and we might need to do a little more unpacking of this in future videos, but it's related to the Shinto origin stories and creation myths that are part of the indigenous traditions in Japan. And one such creation myth, essentially the story of the creation of the world and all that is, begins with the imagery of the earth and the heavens or the universe as separate spheres, that there was the earthly realm, there was the heavenly realm, and they were disconnected. They were not connected with each other. And that the harmonizing between those two realms, the interconnecting of those two spaces, of the rooted, nourishing, earthy groundedness and the reaching, visionary, space of a wide open possibility in the universe, that the harmonizing of those two places came with the introduction of the human heart. And so that the human heart, it kind of goes in a few different directions. One, that our heart is this landscape of interconnection, that it's this territory of harmonizing all that is and all of our different ways of being nourished and of interacting with the world. And on the other side, our heart is a landscape and territory that requires a certain structure in order for it to function well. And that is that it have a strong rooted foundation, and then it have a spacious, wide open space above and around. And that creates kind of this map that we use inside of the system of Reiki, which, in short, we call the three diamonds, beginning with the first diamond in the belly that's associated with the earth, associated with the physical body, then moving to the second diamond in the head, which is associated with the mind and the heavens and the universe and all the spaciousness and possibility above. And the third diamond then is the heart, and it's that space of connection, of compassion and interconnection. And that we work with building that landscape in our practice, right? Our meditations are focusing on these three physical places in the body, and then a lot of the imaginal spaces that are associated with them, and that we work with them in that order, really building that foundation of earthy rootedness before creating a lot of space around it before coming to the heart. And so, I love the idea of the way that you're guiding these experiences where it seems to me that there's a process people get to go through that might help build that landscape, build that foundation, get grounded, get rooted, and then open up, this spaciousness, and then come into the territory of the heart, and then literally envision what we find there on a given day.
Yeah, really to discover what we find there, to be able to uncover it, to get through the layers.
Exactly. And healing inside of the system of Reiki is sometimes defined as remembering the wholeness of our true self. And we talk about these practices as being ones that peel away those layers, that clear away those layers that are in the way, that cloud the atmosphere inside of that landscape, that territory of our true self. And certainly exploring that territory through visual art and through creation. We often do that through ritual, through kind of moving things around in the space when we're doing things here in the studio, through movement. It's been a long time since I've guided people to kind of work in the realm of kind of visual art and creating things. So yeah, it feels very like familiar and also like new and exciting to hear you talk about creating those kinds of spaces.
Yeah, I think that art is such a wonderful space to connect with the heart, because it just comes as it is, and we get to sit with a piece of art, and there's so many different styles out there, so many different pieces of imagery that can just strike us and catch our attention. You go into a gallery, or you see something in a friend's house or a museum, and they have those benches there, and you can just sit and really, it's a space of no words. And I think that's the space of the heart in a lot of ways. Music does the same thing, and art is definitely one of those places. I think in terms of words, the next best thing is poetry, and certainly chanting and getting to sing. In terms of that Shinto creation story you were talking about, one of my favorite all-time geometrical forms is the six-pointed star. And that's the center of this piece here. And it's created from the seed of life. We've got the 7 circles of creation, the 7 days of creation, lots of different things that relate to the number 7. But when you have those 7 circles, it creates this, what's called the seed of life. then you have the 6-pointed star. You have the center circle, and then you have 6 petals. And the 6-pointed star is a 2D representation of the Merkaba, or a star tetrahedron. And that's basically the geometrical representation of what you're talking about, of the union of earth and sky, and that coming together. That is the symbol in many traditions of the heart chakra.
Yeah.
And that is that union, that place of union between opposites. And that's what the heart is. That's where all of the paradox of life, all of the things that couldn't possibly go together or can make sense of, lives and thrives in that realm of the heart.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like that's where true compassion comes from too, is being able to hold those paradoxes in that place and find their union, because there is a place of union, and the union comes from that love.
Right. And the awareness, and then putting that awareness into practice, that when we can find that union inside of ourselves, beginning with the most obvious part of ourself, which is our physical body. So feeling the connection between our mind and our gut and our heart, right? Which we can also understand as intuition, feeling that integration of those different parts of ourselves, allows us to move out in the world in a way that sees integration and seeks it and seeks connection, as opposed to disconnection. And so, these perspectives, they can sometimes feel a little bit esoteric, or a little hard to understand or integrate, or a little bit fluffy, or a little bit, what does this have to do with daily life? And I would say this has everything to do with daily life, because how do we show up in our daily life? How do we show up when we're having a hard time? When we're extremely busy, when we're stressed? How do we show up when we have decisions to make and we don't have all of the information that we need, right? Do we show up with an inherent sense of integration and groundedness and spaciousness and connection, compassion, or do we show up disintegrated, disconnected, maybe not even feeling the connection between our body and our thoughts? So, this kind of work, I always invite us to, let our imaginations go with the esoteric and all of the imagery and all of the, like, whoa, what does that even mean? And then, like, okay, but really, what does this mean? Like, for my actual life, for the decision I have to make, for the busy day I have tomorrow, for the horrific shit that's going on in the world that I can just barely stand it, right? How do I bring this into that day to day? And having the visual representation of a piece of art that symbolizes that for us somehow, is one of those ways to do that. My studio is full of art that brings these reminders to me. I'm looking at this art piece right across from me that represents that similar symmetry between above and below in that center place.
And that's the key. I think that's the key to the visual art piece, in that how is this happening in my real life, is finding those pieces of art that you really do connect with on a heart level, and in a really inspiring way, and that symbolizes something meaningful to you, that will help you move forward, that can be a daily visual reminder of how you want to be in the world.
Yeah, I love that as a practice and as a piece of advice. And I think that maybe one final thing that I'd love to invite you to reflect on and share, again, in the realm of advice, perhaps with those who are listening. One of the things that I've worked with a lot in my own life and in my work, and have made some videos reflecting on this, is the damaging way in which our culture often holds art and creativity, and the way in which we limit who gets to define themselves as creative or artistic, who doesn't, and the many endless ways in which we condition children to box themselves in. And Julia Cameron, in The Artist's Way, talks about the creativity wound, that moment in childhood where we're expressing ourselves, we're exploring creativity, and somebody says, that's not right, that's not good, that's not how that's supposed to look, you're not doing it right, stay inside the lines, all of those sorts of things. And when I've done a lot of work in the realm of creativity, and I hear this story over and over again from people, that moment that they had in childhood where they were taught that they were not creative, and how, it blows my mind every time we really unpack that story and see where it continued to show up in the person's life, that there's a life defining characteristic of that. And so when I think about even the invitation that you extended for folks to behold a piece of art, contemplate it, let it speak to them, in a way that's open and unattached, or to perhaps join you in a workshop where they're invited to create some art. And I just think of the folks who are going to feel like that's not for them because they're carrying this story that they're not artistic. And they've bought into this lie that they're not creative. I say lie because I believe that every
Because it
human
is.
is creative, right? It's a complete lie. So I think, I think the advice or the question that I'm kind of sitting with is, how would you advise somebody who hears that invitation that you extended and says, that's not for me?
So, first of all, creativity is our birthright. That's where I'm coming from when I have any of these kinds of conversations. And creativity doesn't have to express itself in a painting. So what I would say is, what do you naturally gravitate towards where you feel creative? Is it in writing? Is it in painting or drawing? Is it in singing or playing an instrument or cooking or or teaching, like just working with kids? Like there's every possible job thing you could do can be a creative act. So first of all, my invitation to people when we talk about this is, well, where do you feel creative? What kind of creativity would you like to explore? And if you want to explore drawing and painting, because that's my realm of expertise, is to let go of whether you are an artist or not, because that's not what it's about. It's not about how you identify as this or that. If you have sparks of excitement about exploring a practice, this is a practice. What can you, like, who can you go to? Who do you gravitate to? Who might have a style of teaching or guiding you in a way through a creative practice that you would enjoy? Will it be fun? Do they create a space for you to enjoy it? A place of no judgment. We don't have to, when we're creating our pieces, we're not critiquing them. We're talking about what it means to us and not what it means to everyone else. What does it mean to you? And what are you discovering about yourself when you're creating it? And it might be that you're bumping up against a lot of those old stories that you had about not being an artist. But if you can persevere through the process and say, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway.
Yeah.
And guess what? I am an artist. I am an artist because I'm making art right now. And this is my kind of art. This is the way that I express myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing I can create is ever wrong, can ever go wrong. So that's where I'm coming from with it, with my students.
I love that invitation for folks to consider what a piece means to them, what their relationship with it is, rather than do I like it or is it good or bad, right? It's like, because that matters so much less, if at all, right? There can be something that we look at and say, objectively, I don't like that, or subjectively, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's take a moment. Let's, be in this space. Let's get grounded. Let's perceive it. What's my relationship with it? What does it mean to me in this
What
moment?
does it mean to me? And what am I going through? Like, what literally as I'm creating it? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? whatever you're thinking and feeling, whether it's wonderful or really challenging, especially if it's challenging, it is not a bug. That is not a bug. It is a feature. That's what I like to say. One of my friends says that it's a feature of the process to be able to go into these parts of ourselves that might need some nurturing through the process. And how can we hold ourselves through that?
I love it.
And that can be related to literally the physical act of making the art, because there's a lot that we need to unpack there sometimes. And then simultaneously we're working through like what kind of art am I creating? Why am I creating this piece of art? How does it relate to all these different realms of my life? Do I want to explore my health? Do I want to explore my relationship with my mom? Do I want to explore my any number of things that you can bring some intention to heal, to pray about, literally with the piece of art that you're making.
I mean, it sounds like you are creating such a nourishing and dynamic space, and one that is supportive enough for people to get vulnerable with that process and to explore potentially some challenging things, but to do that in this really nourishing and dynamic environment. And I love that. I think it's so necessary that we have spaces like that, whatever the purpose or the focus of that space is, like that feeling of being nourished, engaged, and therefore willing and able to be vulnerable. We just need more spaces like that. So I'm really, really grateful for
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And you mentioned that the best way for folks to find out about joining such spaces is through your newsletter. So we will put that information down in the notes below. Is there anything else that you'd like folks to know about in terms of how they can connect with you and your work?
Yeah, the best place is through my newsletter on my website, ishkala.com. And I will be having, for the first time, I'll be hosting an online version of that Drawing in Your Heart's Desire workshop in January, on the weekend of January 7th. It's either going to be the 7th or 8th. So I'm putting all of that together now. And I'm really looking forward to that, because then I can also reach a lot more people in my audience who are all over the country. And then we'll be hosting more of those in person. I'm also on Instagram, so you can look up Ishka Lha on Instagram, the art of Ishka Lha there, and the art of Ishka Lha on Facebook. And I post lots of different little videos, and you can see time lapses of some of my creative process, and there's things that I'm thinking about that I want to share with people, and hopefully it's inspiring. I do a lot of writing too, so on the newsletter people can receive not only some beautiful art, but also some of the invocations and more about my creative process, and the mythology behind the work, and what my prayers are for it to be for others.
Beautiful.
And also my music is on there, so people can find our music and more info about the art experiences.
Beautiful. Yeah, so we'll put all of that information down below, all of these opportunities to explore the mythologies that shape our imagination and our life and our understanding of the world and ourselves and each other. So important to make space for that kind of work. I really appreciate you being in this conversation to find these points of connection, these crossroads between these two traditions that we work inside of, the many places that they overlap. It's been really exciting finding those points of commonality. And I look forward to seeing the details of these upcoming events. I'd love to attend your online if I'm available at the time you choose. So I look forward to learning that as well. And for those of you watching, listening, we would love to hear your own stories. What came up for you as you listen to this conversation? What have your experiences been working with the creative process or with visual arts as a pathway to ritual, a pathway to spiritual exploration, and as an embodiment of spiritual love? We would love to hear what this has meaning for in your life, any questions that came up for you, for either of us. And as you journey on this exploration of creativity and spiritual love, may you be deeply provisioned for it. Until next time, I love you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michaela.